Well, in the studio with me are Jack Rowlett, who's a political commentator, and Lauren Belcross, who's a former Labour advisor. We'll talk mainly political things in a second, but Jack, just firstly, your reaction to what is happening in Australia this morning or this evening with them.
Well, it's appalling. It's one of those stories that just gets more horrific the more comes out about it. And yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that he's dead now, the attacker. And thoughts with all those people in Australia who are affected and their families.
Great heroism, Lauren. Of course, Bondi Beach, very, very well known, a part of Sydney, and of course there'll be many expatriates as well who are out there. Many people in gap years and travelling and so on. I have some relatives who live not a million miles away in southwest Sydney. I'll be checking in with them this morning and so on. This is affecting Sydney, Australia, but it's affecting the world as well because Sydney is such an international city.
Yeah, no, like you say, I've had to check in with a few of my mates to check that they're okay. It's absolutely horrific, and you heard the detail there in that reporter's piece about a baby being stabbed. I mean, the sort of savagery that this attack has unleashed, it's really, really horrible. And, you know, where does one even go to describe it? It does kind of say, you know, it does introduce a worry that, you know, when this could happen here and how easy it is for a perpetrator to do something like this. Yes. It's just something they're thinking about.
Lauren, thank you. We'll return, of course, to that story in Australia throughout the programme. We're going to speak to another reporter a little bit later on. Details are emerging all the time, and if there is any breaking news, anything more we hear on this, of course, we'll bring it to you live on TalkTV. I want to talk to Lauren and Jack about issues closer to home now as well, because the big story politically in the United Kingdom is about Angela Rayner, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, possibly the next Deputy Prime Minister of this country. She said she will step down if she committed a criminal offence. This is a defiant statement. She said she was completely confident she had followed the rules at all times. Police have launched an investigation into claims she had broken electoral law. Jack, what do you make of this story?
Well, I think in the past 48 hours, it's really become much more of a problem for Labour and Angela Rayner. I think prior to the police reopening their investigation, it's quite hard to understand for the kind of average follower. It is a complicated story. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's not the same as something like Partygate, for example. But as soon as people hear the police are investigating, as soon as she's had to come out and say she's going to resign if she's found to have done anything wrong, then it gets into the public consciousness. Then people start really picking up on the scandal. I think that the real problem for her is the hypocrisy, right? Because she's called for Tory politicians to resign before investigations were complete over Partygate.
We don't know. I mean, you say hypocrisy. Also, we don't know she's actually done anything wrong, and she says she hasn't done anything wrong.
But this is exactly the point: is when it's when the shoe is on the other foot, when it's been Tory politicians, she's been calling for them to go before investigations are complete, and equally she's been calling for transparency over tax arrangements. She's been calling for Tory MPs at various points to release their tax returns. So I think hypocrisy is always the most corrosive thing for a political reputation. I think that's really what's going on.
What I find quite weird, Lauren, and you're a former Labour advisor, not holding you responsible for everything that Angela Rayner has ever done, of course, and she's been very defiant and says she's done absolutely nothing wrong, and we should remember that. What is clear here is that there is legal advice. Legal advice exists on at least part of this in regard to her selling her home. The former chief prosecutor of this country, Keir Starmer, says he hasn't looked at it. He may not be a tax law expert, but presumably can run his eye over it. I find that a bit weird.
Look, I think the statement that Angela Rayner put out is very, very strong and very, very confident, saying, I will resign if I'm proven to have done anything wrong. And I think she wouldn't have put out such a defiant and such a definitive statement if she wasn't extremely confident of not doing anything wrong. So I think she's kind of set her own standard there.
But she's been forced into that position, has she not?
I don't think she's been forced into it necessarily. I think she wants to kill this story. She thinks she's done nothing wrong.
I mean, she could have killed it by releasing the legal advice, though.
Perhaps. I don't necessarily think that would have killed it, because I think there would have been people and the story would have still been rumbling. She's now put out an extremely confident statement saying, I've done nothing wrong. This is, in her statement she put out, I think it was yesterday evening, she said, yes, this is a repeated tactic that's been used by the Conservatives of throwing legal claims during an election period to try and muddy the waters a little bit. And I think she wouldn't have put out such a confident, such a strong statement if she didn't believe she wasn't doing anything wrong.
Jack, do people care?
I think they do now, and I think they will increasingly, precisely because the police are investigating, and that makes it simpler to understand. It has more cut through. And I think the problem is, I don't think Angela Rayner has followed her own standard. I don't think politicians should have to resign before they're found to have done something wrong. but Angela Rayner does, and therefore that's the problem. She's not following her own standards, she's not following her own demands, and you can't have one set of demands for one side of the aisle and another for the other.
Dawn in Chelmsford says, "Hi Peter, Angela Rayner is using the Starmer Beergate tactic of threatening to resign if found guilty. This is to put pressure on the police." Dawn, I am as cynical as the next person, but I'm not sure that's a sort of... I'm not sure I quite follow your logic on that one. She does say, fair enough, she'll step down if she committed a criminal offence. This is also about housing as well, and we remember that of her many, many job titles, Lauren, one of them is Shadow Housing Secretary, Shadow Levelling Up Secretary as well. So this is to do with, of course, capital gains tax and the rules around housing. I just wonder in that particular aspect of things, how significant that is.
I don't think it's a particular thing. It's an added... why it's a story and why we're discussing it, because there's an issue with the topic which your brief covers, therefore it takes more of an interest in it. But I don't think it changes the thing fundamentally, which is there's this accusation and she's made a very, very defiant statement about her not doing anything wrong, or so she claims. So I guess we'll have to find out when there's any further announcement.
Well, Greater Manchester Police are looking into it. Ken has been in touch. I should say I haven't even given out the numbers because we've been covering what happened, the horrific things that happened in Bondi Beach. If you want to get your voice on the air on any of the issues we're talking about today, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Tommy's waiting for your call. If you've never done it before, it's dead easy. You ring up the number 0344 499 1000. You have a quick chat with Tommy, you make your point, and then as many people as we can, we get them on the air between now and 1 o'clock. So that number one more time, 0344 499 1000. You can text me on 87222. Be sure to put the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at TalkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. A number of people have been in touch on my opposition to Trident at the moment. I'm not necessarily opposed to Trident. It certainly gives a lot of jobs to the UK. I just wonder what the point of it is, especially when we've had trials where the nuclear warheads, or at least the firing mechanisms, don't actually work. But I'll be put right on that a little bit later on about how it's a massive deterrent. You can text me, as I say, 87222 with the word talk in your text. Tweet me at TalkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Also on WhatsApp, you can send a text message 0344 499 1000. So those are the numbers. Ken has been in touch on text 87222. Hi Peter, much as I do not like Angela Rayner, Angela Rayner's politics and the low-level language she uses, I have to point out that as far as capital gains tax goes, you can have one primary residence and you do not actually have to live in the house or flat. There are many people who work overseas, for example teachers in Dubai, who have property in the UK and return to it for the summer break of 2 or 3 months. When they sell the property, their main residence, there is no capital gains tax. No different to Angela Rayner not living in the property, even though she is in close proximity. Well, Ken, those are really good points. I suppose the point as well is about where you're registered to vote. The electoral law is the thing that people are looking into. There's a really interesting point, actually, Jack, on this, which is that with William Ragg, which was the scandal we were talking about last week, the Conservatives said, oh no, nothing to see here, he's given out a few numbers, he's apologised, everything's fine, you know, he's resigned the whip and so on. Yet this is, you know, potential fine of anything between £1,500 and £16,000 for Angela Rayner. Are the Conservatives having double standards here as well, do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I think they are, absolutely. This is always the way. The parties, they can give it out, but they can't take it back. And I think that's really the big problem. There needs to be one standard for all politicians of all parties. As a general rule, it's innocent until proven guilty, right? I think there are exceptions if, for example, you have someone whose portfolio is highly related to the thing they're being accused of. I think in this instance, that's not necessarily that relevant because housing and local government and that stuff is not... It's not necessarily related to capital gains tax, even though the issue is about capital gains tax on a house.
And also, the issue happened long before she was ever appointed to this brief.
Well, that's right.
So
that's also part of it.
She's misused her position.
It's still wrong if she's... No, she hasn't. She absolutely has not abused her position in any stretch of the imagination. But certainly, it's not a good look. I mean, how do you think Labour could clamp down on this? If you're on the inside at the moment, Lauren, what would you be advising to say? Actually, let's get rid of this story and start talking about it?
I think they've handled it pretty perfectly.
We're talking about it now.
Well, we are, but I think, you know, they've put out a very defiant statement, and if she falls foul of that statement and the standards that she set herself, then she's going to go, and she's going to have to go. But if that doesn't, then it will prove that she was right to set the standards that high for herself.
We've talked about the person who may well be the next Deputy Prime Minister. What about the woman who was Prime Minister for about 5 minutes? Liz Truss says number 10 was a prison infested with fleas. She's got a book to flog, and there are a few headlines about this. What do you make of this, Lauren?
I mean, I do have a vision now of poor researchers in newsrooms up and down the country looking through footage of her and the interviews that she's given over the 44 days for footage of her scratching ferociously to see if they can spot
fleas
anything.
also aren't good with lettuces, I've heard as well. So yeah, I mean, this is a new book that she's got out. She spent the first weeks in her job itching because of I'm not scratching my head. I'm thinking about fleas. Jack does not have fleas, by the way. Downing Street may have it, but Jack certainly doesn't. He gets a thing on the back of his neck every month. Anyway, so apparently it was infested with fleas caused by Dylan the dog, caused by Boris Johnson's dog. Liz Truss has claimed in her new book. She spent the first weeks in the job itching because of flea infestation at number 10. It's hard to believe that Boris Johnson wouldn't deflea his dog, Jack. I mean, surely he's a responsible dog owner.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think she says in the book that there's no definitive evidence that it was Dylan the dog. She's not totally willing to point fingers.
I'm pretty sure it was Dylan.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I think Carrie would have taken better care of Dylan than Boris.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, I mean, look, her book is 10 Years to Save the West. The place was infested with fleas is what we're talking about. What else is the book about? What else have we kind of learned from this, Jack?
Well, not much about how to save the West. We've also got some stuff about how hard it is to get an Ocado delivery to 10 Downing Street.
The struggle is real.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And also Liz Truss making the Queen's death all about her, which I think
this
only
is
she
interesting.
would be able to do.
This is very weird. What she actually said. She revealed how she felt in the immediate aftermath of this is the Queen's death. Now there's the second full day that Liz Truss was in power. And obviously, I mean, having served this country for over 70 years, the monarch dies. We're all devastated. We're covering it in great depth, and it's a real horrific moment. Not horrific, but difficult moment for the nation and where we go and what we do. We received the solemn news that the Queen had died peacefully at Balmoral. To be told this on only my second full day as Prime Minister felt utterly unreal. In a state of shock, I found myself thinking, "Why me? Why now?" I mean, I don't know about you, Lauren, but my sympathies were with the royal family rather than Liz Truss.
I think so, yeah. I mean, look, to give her sort of this... On the second day of the job, this is me being my most sympathetic, I am trying here, it is a pretty big thing to deal with, the death of a monarch of serving 75 years, and that's on your second day of the job. So
yes,
I'll give her a bit of credit on that.
Why write it down?
I know, that's just ridiculous.
Why
and
tell people?
As with most of her premiership, full of ridiculous ideas and self-censored nonsense. The fact that she then talks about how wonderful she thought the mini budget went. This is now every person in the country on average is paying £240 more in their mortgage because of her decision making. There's no contrition for that. It's now... I mean, even
let's
the
not
title...
forget the worst chancellor this country has ever had, Kwasi Kwarteng.
Well, indeed.
I mean, is Liz Truss on this planet, Jack?
No, I don't think so. I think that's evidence from the book. I think that the problem is the lack of contrition and the lack of self-awareness. I think, if you're only Prime Minister for that long, you mess it up in such a catastrophic way. The least you could do is just be quiet for a bit. But she's not willing to do that, and this book is just the latest example of that. It's ridiculous.
Quite a few people getting in touch on Angela Rayner. Maybe they'll get in touch on Liz Truss as well, 0344 499 1000. Amanda says the arrogance and hypocrisy of Angela Rayner is astounding, a sad reflection of the grade of Labour politicians today. She's been defended by Dan from Kent, who says, I like Angela Rayner. She's gritty, passionate and entertaining at the soapbox. She ain't a Tory, really. Barry in North Yorkshire said Rayner has only now come out and said she will resign if she's found to have done wrong. She's obviously been given the nod as Starmer sorry, this is garbled slightly. Starmer and Burnham will have told her not to worry, according to Barry. Leslie says, hi, for Starmer, the former head of the Department of Prosecution's Crown Prosecution Service, not to have seen the proof is a get-out clause for him. Leslie, is this just a conspiracy theory, Jack, or has he deliberately not read that legal advice, do you think?
I mean, you would have thought if he did have total confidence in Angela Rayner, he wouldn't have hesitated to see the advice. It does feel like he's kind of got a get out of jail free card now if Angela Rayner is found to have broken the rules. It doesn't fill me with confidence about Keir Starmer's confidence in his top team. I think it's a total get out. Absolutely.
Okay. Mick has been in touch and said, number 10 fleas per Dylan. What about the number 10 cat? Well, all I would say, Mick, is that Larry has been there for I think 11 years now, certainly quite a while, and no one's ever complained about fleas previously. That's all I would say. But obviously, I'm Team Larry. Speaking of Dylan the dog, Boris Johnson has refused to rule out a return to frontline politics. Sorry, I don't know if I have the energy for this. He's refused to rule out this. Former Prime Minister told an audience at Georgetown University in Washington that he could re-enter politics if he had something to contribute. Lauren, does he have something to contribute?
I mean, my personal view, no, but I also think we probably haven't seen the last of Boris Johnson.
No, never write him off.
A few months ago, I read his book on Churchill, which is actually quite a good read. That's the thing about Boris, even though I disagree with his politics more than anything, he's a very good writer.
He is a good writer, yeah.
But in that, you can sort of see, I know obviously it was written before he was Prime Minister, but you can see the themes which Boris then pursues in office. You know, the lack of Churchill's loyalty to a particular party, obviously moved between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And you can see Boris potentially doing the same if the Conservatives are reduced to a rump in the next election, him coming out and trying to head off the new force of what emerges from it. So would I rule out Boris coming back to frontline politics? No, absolutely not. And I think, you know, you've also seen his ability to win over other political people who vote for other parties. You know,
yes.
He was
in
mayor
2019,
of London.
yeah, absolutely. Jack, quick word on Boris Johnson?
Well, I think the last thing we need is him coming back. I think he should stick to doing what he's doing at the moment, which is promoting the cause of Ukraine and trying to win support for giving them more weapons and financial aid.
Leslie has been in touch and says, David Lammy, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, saying Labour are not held to the same standards as they are in opposition, says all you need to know about Labour. I'd love to interview David Lammy sometime. He never comes on the station. Don't know why that is. A former Inspector of Taxes has been in touch and says, you just can't help it, can you? Kwasi Kwarteng, the worst Chancellor? Ridiculous. Gordon Brown beats Kwasi Kwarteng hands down. Well, look, Gordon Brown sold our gold. I don't think he was single-handedly responsible for the global financial crisis, but he did fail to fix the roof when the sun was shining. Who's a worse Chancellor, Jack? Kwasi Kwarteng or Gordon Brown?
I mean, Kwasi Kwarteng for certain. I mean, the proof is in how long each lasted, really, isn't it? To be quite frank.
Lauren?
I think, yeah, Kwasi. I think, you know, a bit harsh from the texter on Gordon. I think you can make criticism of him, but
I love this from Labour people. They always refer to Tony Blair and Gordon Brown by their first names, as if they're like their best mates.
Everyone refers to Boris as Boris.
Yeah, but maybe Gordon Brown is your best mate. I don't know.
Oh, he could be.
My favourite Gordon.
Would you prefer I refer to him as Mr. Brown?
Yes.
To be fair, we probably should give you a more formal era of politics.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Belcross. Absolutely.
Sorry, Mr. Cardwell.
No problem. I prefer Dame, actually, or Sarah. Sarah would be good. Or Lord, depending on what you want to do. No, I think with Gordon Brown, my favourite Gordon Brown story ever is this guy came up to him and said, Gordon, there's this really weird story about you going about when he was Chancellor, that you were seen in a car park, like trying to persuade a footballer to come over to Wraith Rovers. He was very involved with Wraith Rovers. And it's like, what a ridiculous story. And Gordon Brown says, oh no, someone saw me. So even as Chancellor of the Exchequer, he was still heavily involved in what was going on with Wraith Rovers. Anyway, I think he wasn't the best Chancellor, but Kwasi Kwarteng was far worse. So I'm sorry about that. Lots of people getting in touch about Angela Rayner as well. Someone saying it's plausible deniability for Starmer not looking at the legal advice. I just don't know why he does. But anyway, let's talk about another Labour politician now, Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary. He has defended Labour's plan to use the private sector to cut the NHS backlog. Lauren, what do you make of this?
I think it's a very good move, actually, and I think it's one of the rare occasions where one of the front benchers from the Labour Party is willing to face down critics from the left. I think it would have been very easy.
Are you not a middle class lefty? Surely you're one of his targets.
No,
talked about this week.
Far too right wing for that. No, but no. On a serious note, I think it would have been very easy for Wes to just go along with what all the vested interest says.
Another first
Sorry,
name
Mr.
there.
Streeting.
Your best mate.
For Mr. Streeting to go ahead with what all the unions and what all the vested interest groups would have said, but actually it's not dealing with the problem. And the NHS has got a lot of problems. It's got huge backlogs. It's got huge delays.
There is a lot of private sector work within the health service at the moment, but he's saying actually perhaps more needs to be done and we should use what's there already. There's no point in operating theatres standing empty.
The huge cost to the economy is people waiting, people being in pain, people not getting their treatments, and if you can use the private sector to get rid of this backlog and get stuff moving, fair enough, you should do so. I also quite enjoyed his little dig to Diane Abbott. So Diane Abbott, the Labour, think she's got the whip suspended MP
Yes,
for
independent MP now.
Independent MP for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. She had a go at him for this interview he gave to The Guardian, and Mr. Streeting, pointed out that actually Diane Abbott sent her son to private school when she felt that the schools in her local area were not good, and it was only the last Labour government who improved them, that she would not have done so. So this was in fact a perfect similar use of the private sector to improve standards until they're ready for everybody. So
he's actually saying from a left-wing perspective, it's not right that people who are poorer are priced out of faster healthcare, according to Wes Streeting. It goes against everything I believe as a Labour politician. As somebody who might lead a middle-class life now, but with working-class roots, it's a betrayal of the people I grew up with. Jack, what do you make of that?
Well, I think we've got total system failure of healthcare in this country at the moment. We need radical ideas, and I think Streeting's absolutely right on this. I think he says, he'd be looking at utilising the private sector for as long as is needed. As long as is needed, I think, is forever, because most comparable countries to the UK use a mixture of public and private sector provision for healthcare. They have much better outcomes than the UK. So actually, we need more long-term thinking. This can't just be something to kind of fill a stopgap. It needs to be long-term reform, moving more towards a social insurance model, I think. And I think really Streeting and Labour are the only people who are going to be able to do this, because if the Tories try to do it, they will be accused of privatising it, attacking universal healthcare. Labour have a golden opportunity to actually reform the NHS, reform healthcare, and make it fit for a developed nation in the 21st century.
I just want to read another thing that Wes Streeting has said. The argument I'll make unapologetically is that those people who say we shouldn't use the private sector to cut waiting lists will have to be honest about the fact that they're telling people who can't afford to go privately that their left-wing principles say they should be waiting longer. That's a very powerful argument.
Exactly, and I think this is what I mean by the vested interest he's taking on, because a lot of people will say, right, you do have to wait in the queue because that's the NHS. But what a lot of rich people are doing is they're paying for it. So why should it be that only the rich can get to jump the queue and not queue with everybody else? I don't think that's a right system.
I mean, in theory, universal healthcare should work, but in practice, as every person in this country knows, it isn't.
Exactly, and I think, having to explain to relatives abroad that actually it's a standard, normal thing for people to have to queue on the phones at 8 in the morning if they ever want to try and get an appointment with their GPs. I know a woman who waited 19 hours in A&E recently. I mean, getting a GP's appointment. We all know this. Tell us your experience. 0344 499 1000 on whether Gordon Brown is the worst Chancellor or not. Ivan has been in touch and says Gordon Brown was the worst Chancellor. He recreated the Dickensian workhouse, did he? The maximum wage and working tax credits, please sir, can I have some more, says Ivan, who disagrees that Kwasi Kwarteng was the worst Chancellor this country has ever had. If you have any other thoughts on who the worst Chancellor this country has ever had was, or whether you believe that Kwasi Kwarteng was the worst Chancellor that's ever had, which I believe to be the case, let us know. 0344 499 1000. Gordon Brown robbed thousands of pensioners when he raided their pension pots they'd paid into, says Leslie. Let us know your thoughts on this. I didn't think this would be the question people would be reacting to most this morning, but nonetheless, this programme sometimes goes in different directions than I expected to at 10 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. You can text me at 722 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at TalkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell, or send us a WhatsApp 0344 499 1000. This is a weird story about Gibraltar. Britain's Gibraltar concessions with Spain just to reach a post-Brexit deal. The Red Arrows have axed a trip to Gibraltar after Madrid warned it could be a hostile act and threatened retaliation, with a visit by HMS Queen Elizabeth also cancelled to appease the Spaniards. Jack, what on earth is going on here?
Well, it's bullying, isn't it? Let's call it what it is. It's the Spanish government.
The Red Arrows are amazing. Have you ever seen the Red Arrows?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Several times,
brilliant.
yeah.
They're really, really talented people.
And it's such a shame that the people of Gibraltar are not going to see them just because the Spanish government can't accept the democratic will of Gibraltar. They've voted twice in the last half century.
Overwhelmingly.
Or so. Yeah, something like 99% to remain a British territory, and Spain needs to respect that. And the fact that the Vice Commissioner of the EU saying that Gibraltar is Spanish is an absolute disgrace as well. It's
Lauren, what do you make of this?
Yeah, what I don't understand is why the Foreign Office are agreeing to the demands of the Spanish. I think Gibraltar is British. It always has been British territory. We're not going to hand it over to Spain. The people who live in Gibraltar do not want to be part of Spain. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be bullied by Spain into doing what we want to do in our sovereign territory. As long as people in Gibraltar want to remain part of Britain, it is part of Britain and should be treated as such. I think any kind of appeasement to Spain isn't going to do us any good in the long term, because we're just acquiescing to their demands, and who knows, maybe their demands could be even crazier in the next few years.
Yeah, we're getting more info from Sydney as well. Really interesting tweet here from someone saying a lone female police officer who was nearby rushed into Westfield Bondi Junction, Sydney. Upon hearing of multiple stabbings, she shot the perpetrator dead. He had murdered 5 people more in a critical condition. A police press conference has just heard. That's a reporter in Sydney. And I think with all of this, actually, what's happening in Sydney, we need to focus on the heroes, actually. The lone female police officer who ran into danger, reportedly shot dead the attacker, gave CPR to an injured person. There's a civilian who's been branded Bollard Man. He tried to stop the attacker using a bollard as a weapon as well. That's just more detail coming out of this. Running into danger is what heroes do. We've seen that in the London terror attacks. There's just so much more detail we're going to get into right across the programme. We're hopefully talking to another reporter a little bit later in the programme as well. On the NHS, Glenn in Colchester has been in touch, says, you lot are living in Cloud Cuckoo Land. My local private hospital is full of NHS patients being sent there. It's been happening for years. Well, Glenn, I did mention that NHS patients have been sent to private hospitals. I know some people who've been sent privately as well. I know people who've actually been sent to Ireland, to the Republic of Ireland, to Dublin, from Northern Ireland to a different country to get some of the health care. And I mean, the poorest won't ever have the resources to go privately, but there's a huge swathe of people, Lauren, in the middle classes who could well afford to pay for a consultation or procedure. They'd remove themselves from waiting lists and make way for someone who can't pay. And more people will be making that sacrifice.
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, to avoid the accusations of hypocrisy, like I had a slip disc in my back a few years ago, and I'm unashamed to say I paid for private physiotherapy because there was no way I would have waited on the NHS for up to a year to maybe get some kind of treatment. When you're in that kind of level of agonising pain, you're going to do what you can if you have the resources to do so. But it's unfair that only people with the resources to do so could be. But
also perfectly logical that they do so, Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why wouldn't you? But it's the problem is that we have people who can't afford access to that care, and we also have people who can just about afford it, but they're then having to spend a huge proportion of their disposable income, or all of their disposable income, on just something basic like healthcare, and because the waiting lists are so long. And it's having such a big effect on the broader economy, because we know that there are so many people off work, there are so many people claiming sickness benefits, and it's because they can't get the healthcare they need. So it's gonna pay back in terms of the positive effects for the economy of getting
Jane has been in touch on this. Perhaps the NHS needs to work as one, take it away from the devolved nations and a cross-party approach from one place. Well, it's really interesting, Jane, actually. It's a very good point. And also, the NHS isn't working in any part of the UK. So you've got the coalition, mandatory coalition in Northern Ireland running the health service, which is on its knees there, 15% higher waiting lists than the rest of the UK. You've got the Conservatives in charge in England, where it's not working. You've got the SNP in charge in Scotland, where it's not working. And you've got Labour in charge in Wales, where it's definitely not working. So this isn't just a party political issue. Maybe we should have one NHS for the whole of the UK. Of course, it's not even the NHS in Northern Ireland. It's the HSC, I think.
But this is what I think is often the problem with. There's a tendency among certain commentators to say, oh, we need to take the NHS out of political decisions. Well, actually, no, these are political decisions. If you choose to do stuff like what Wes Streeting is proposing, this is a political decision, and we shouldn't shy away from it being a political decision and hide behind some technocratic managerialism, which effectively doesn't give real accountability for any decisions that are made. Because if something does go wrong, you want someone to say, well, that was your fault, you messed that up, I want you gone. Yeah, which you're not really seeing any kind of accountability in the NHS.
Although, and maybe the Conservatives are to blame for this by making it NHS England, by making it an arm's length body within that. Lots on Gibraltar. And indeed Gordon Brown. Mick in Wallington says Cameron cannot be trusted to protect Gibraltar and the Falklands. He's an appeaser and a danger to UK security, says Mick in Wallington. Dan says, I'm with Jack. I voted Tory all my life, apart from Blair's first term, only because I didn't want Major and his government of sleaze. I think I might vote Labour this coming election because of this idea of savings in the private sector. Tad says, Peter, when making a comparison between Kwasi Kwarteng and Gordon Brown, we need to get the right context. what Kwasi Kwarteng did was ill-advised. What Gordon Brown did was treasonous. Alistair Heath's excellent account of this matter conclusively blows the lid on Brown, says Tad Davison in Cambridge, so thank you for that. Thanks also to Mary in County Down, who says that I recently met a lady leaning heavily on a stick, waiting 4 years for a knee replacement. 4 years? Goodness me. She was just back from a cruise costing £5,000 a head for her and her husband. That would have paid for her knee and would have saved her years of pain, allowing her to enjoy her everyday life, be more productive perhaps. She made the choice to have a very expensive holiday instead. Another acquaintance awaiting cataract surgery to prevent blindness is choosing to do a roof space conversion while languishing on a 5-year waiting list. Jack, would you go privately? Maybe you have.
Yeah, I mean, I have. I have gone privately. My partner's gone privately as well. You have to, because the waiting lists are so long, and I'm very fortunate to be in the position where, you know, I've been able to afford it, and my family have been able to support me at times as well. And you know, most people probably aren't in the position to be able to do that. And it's such a basic thing. It's so unacceptable. We are, you know, we're the 6th largest economy in the world. We should have universal access to healthcare for everybody who needs it. We shouldn't have these long waiting lists. It boggles the mind that it's got to this point. It's awful.
The Spanish government have lost the plot, says Amanda. How on earth can they say the brilliant red arrows could pose a threat? That's ludicrous. Also, attacking British tourists seems economically suicidal. Yeah, I totally agree with that, Amanda. I think it's absolute nonsense. Thank you to both my guests. Thank you to Jack Rowlett and to Lauren Bell Cross. Lauren's a former Labour advisor. Jack is a political commentator. Appreciate you coming into the studio. Lots of breaking news today.